Today on Aspiring Women, Lynn Hybels was the respected wife of one of America's most well-known pastors. But her own faith in God was crumbling.
And I really got to the point where I thought, if this is what it means to be a Christian, I just don't think I can do it anymore.
Welcome to AW. I love what we're talking about today on Aspiring Women. We're talking about the whole issue. Are you a people pleaser? Are you a people pleaser?
Oh, most definitely.
You are?
I've been converted. I'm a converted people pleaser.
I think we all three are because we're sanguine.
Yeah.
And we need approval. A sanguine's greatest need is for approval. And I think sometimes that leads us down the wrong path because we commit to too much. We want everybody to be happy. We try to earn people's love.
Yeah, because I will overcommit myself and then be evil about it. I'll do it because I said I was going to do it, but I'm mad the whole time.
And you want everybody at peace,
right.
Except then you're never at peace.
Right.
But because you're angry, you haven't really expressed how you feel about things.
And you tend to be a conformer.
That's
true. It's hard to stand up and take a stand because you want everybody to love you. You don't want to look weird.
That's true, but God broke my face about that because he just told me one day that I was selfish. And I said, I'm generous. How can you say that? He said, no, you're generous not because you want to give, but because you're afraid that someone won't love you for just you.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think that's very true, even for me, Michelle. Many women have been affected by what has been called the disease to please. While it is good and God-honoring to treat others well, it's also possible to be too nice for our own good. That's exactly what happened to Lynn Hybels.
She was a nice girl, obedient, polite, socially acceptable, a really nice girl.
Growing up in a small Michigan town in the 1950s, it never would have occurred to Lynn Hybels that being a nice girl would turn out to be far more of a curse than a blessing.
She had an uncanny ability to keep almost everybody happy almost all the time, though she didn't truly seem to be very happy herself. But I could be wrong. She was always smiling. Well, other things I just described, I think those are fine qualities, and they were very true to my nature. However, mixed in with that was a very deep, intense desire to please people. And that's where, being a nice girl turned bad for me. Because as a devoted people pleaser, I didn't learn to say no. I didn't learn to express my own opinions. I didn't learn to ask for help. I was just very intent on being good and doing the right thing and keeping everybody happy all the time.
Most important of all was keeping God happy, which in her young mind was not going to be easy.
The church that we attended was very narrow, very strict, and as a very sensitive child, what I heard and what sticks out in my mind is a message about guilt and shame and punishment and fear, and that was what I based my childhood faith on. So that's what drove a lot of my decisions. This is a very harsh, demanding God, and I have to work very hard and be very good and try to please him all the time.
Which meant giving up some of the things that she loved.
I love to dance, and because I was a people-pleasing and a God-pleasing little girl, when I was 10 years old, I decided that dancing was a sin. Ballet. I had been taking ballet since I was 4 years old, and I said, well, if that's a sin, I have to stop doing that. And so I gave up ballet.
Giving up things she loved to earn the favor of a severe God became the pattern of Lynn's life into adulthood.
A lot of the things that I really love sort of fit in this category of this is a waste of time. I love literature, but that's a waste of time. I love walking outside and just enjoying the beauty of creation, but no, that's a waste of time. You've got to be busy doing something constructive for God.
And there was always plenty of ministry work for a nice girl like Lynn to do. Soon after marrying her husband, Bill, she helped him start Willow Creek Community Church, which rapidly became one of the largest churches in America. As it grew from a few dozen members to over 15,000, her things-to-do list grew longer and longer. The pace of ministry left no time to discover and nurture her own spiritual gifts, and Lynn lost more and more of herself with each passing day.
As my husband got busier and busier, I thought, what my real role in life, and again, I think this is a nice girl role, is that I'm supposed to help make his life happen. I'm supposed to facilitate his life, his ministry, and his gifts. And he was very busy, very public, very much in demand. And so I just sort of slid into thinking that, well, whatever I have to offer with my little gifts of playing the flute or writing articles, well, that's not really important. And so I just became more and more consumed with doing whatever it took to keep him going and let go of what my true passions and interests and gifts were.
Did you feel, whether you verbalized it or not, did you feel that his ministry and he as a person was more valuable than you?
Now, back then, I wouldn't have said that. I would have said the right words. I would have said, we are all equal before God, and our lives, our gifts matters. I would have said that, but I didn't live that out. My life became very much about administrative tasks that were related to Bill's ministry, secretarial chores. I picked up all of the responsibilities at home, you know, with raising kids and all the details and the mundane things, everything behind the scenes, because I thought that's what was important. Even when I realized that I really loved to write and I felt called to use that gift, I thought, okay, I could write my words and my ideas, or I could edit Bill's books. I could work on his material. And I thought, well, of course, if I want my life to really count, I'll work on his stuff because it's much more valuable than mine. So for many years I did that. And I learned many skills as a writer, but I certainly didn't learn how to raise my own voice and express my own thoughts.
While on the outside, she was busy pleasing God and everyone around her, on the inside, she was quietly dying.
It definitely didn't make me happy, but again, I thought that was my problem. If I were more committed, if I were more willing to respond to God's calling in my life, I would be happy. And so I prayed, you know, God, help me to be content with my life, you know, but it didn't work, and I just really kept getting more and more miserable.
I can so relate to Lynn. I also grew up in a very strict church, and while God and the church were kind of blended in my mind, I think it was almost more of being in bondage to what the church taught.
Proving to folks that you were really saved.
Yeah, because if I had done something that they didn't approve of, and then it was the approval thing again, they would have looked down their nose at me. And so I never went to one of my proms. I mean, we would do something, you know, like a quasi-prom. We'd like have a supper or something like that. But I never went to one of my proms because I was sure that if Jesus returned while I was at my prom, I would go to hell.
Oh my goodness.
That's what I was taught.
Yes, I understand that very much so. And I think when you grow up in a really conservative denomination, you look at God and, as we were talking about, the church very differently. But I really have struggled most of my life believing that that I was enough and I didn't have to do things. She talked about enjoying the flute, that she loved that, but somehow that wasn't as good as writing a book or stamping on a platform like her husband did.
That's true. Well, when we return, we'll learn what happened when Lynn Hybels turned her back on the only God she knew.
Lynn Hybels had helped her husband Bill start Willow Creek Community Church, which soon became one of the fastest growing churches in recent history. But after years of trying to please God and everyone else, she was exhausted and ready to give up on Christianity altogether. Here's more from Lynn.
The first thing I had to do was acknowledge that I had a really toxic relationship with God. I had to deal with that whole childhood belief that faith was based on striving for God's love. And really, what that involved for me was a pretty dramatic pulling back from my relationship with God.
And so, one beautiful summer day, on the deck of a sailboat, Lynn addressed the God of her childhood.
I can't do it anymore, I said. I can't keep striving for your love. Maybe there's a God somewhere who doesn't drain the life out of people, but I don't know who that God is. You're the only God I know, and I can't carry the burden of you anymore. And I felt like a heretic. I felt like, oh, now I've said it, now lightning is going to strike me from heaven. It didn't, fortunately, but that began a process in me of just kind of letting go of this whole God idea and resting and healing.
Tell me about that time of rest.
What did it look like for you?
Well, at that point, I sort of wished that the world would just stop and let me off, and that I could do, nothing for a while. That wasn't reality. I mean, I was still raising 2 kids. I was married to a busy husband. There were responsibilities that I still had to fulfill, but whenever I could, I did the only thing that I really had energy for, and that was just to sit and look out the window. And I felt so guilty doing that. I felt horrible. And every day I'd think, okay, no, today you have to get busy again. You have to get out there and strive to earn God's love again. But I just really didn't have the energy to do it. So I would sit by the window and just look outside. And nature has always nourished me. And so I would sit there and watch the birds flying around in the yard, watch the squirrels playing, watch the rain, watch the snow, just rest.
She played music. She looked at art. She even danced. And slowly, she started to heal.
I began to feel something coming to life in me, and that was amazing to me, because I didn't realize how dead I felt inside until I started sitting there, realizing I am really like a bump on a log sitting here. There's nothing inside of me. And then as I continued to do that and began to sense something coming to life, I thought, maybe this is really a good thing to do, because it seems to be having a very positive effect on me. But then at a certain point, that absence of God in my life, which felt really good for a while, began to feel like a void. And I began to sense that there was a benevolent presence in the universe, and I began to want to reach out to that presence. I was very much still afraid of the God of my childhood and getting back into that whole pattern of striving, but I decided to open my heart just a crack to this presence that seemed to be there, and I just said very quietly, God, I'm here. Are you there? And what I experienced in response to that was something that I will never forget. I love you, the whisper said, right here, right now. I love you so much that I want you to rest. I want you to sit and receive the refreshment of my creation. I want you to listen to music. I want you to dance in the quietness of your bedroom. I want you to be like a child, secure and free in the presence of an adoring parent. I wasn't the one cracking the whip, the one telling you to work harder, the one who made you feel guilty when you relaxed. I was the one who saw you, who knew you, who believed in you, who longed to restore your energy. I was the one trying to love you. And I sensed those words, and it was really that clear and that definite. And it was like everything in my life shifted. And I look back on that as the pivotal moment in my life, because to fully experience the embrace of God's love really does change everything. I mean, it gives you a totally different foundation upon which to base everything in your life.
She could finally say goodbye to the idea of being a nice girl and opt instead to be what she calls a good woman, grounded in God's love and using her unique personality, passions, and gifts to make a difference in the world.
I am still, busy in a lot of ways, in a lot of ministry, but it's not about striving to earn God's love. It comes out of gratitude for that love. And still, for me, this center of my spiritual life is the time I spent daily just to get away and be quiet with God and really hear those loving words again. I need to hear them all the time, and they're there.
I wept really listening to that. Lynn's incredible, heartfelt perspective, going back to her toxic relationship with God. And until she dealt with that toxic relationship, really, she exchanged the truth for a lie. She believed that God was a taskmaster, and it's a heart issue. You got to pull that thing out, and sometimes it takes a long time.
And counseling, the importance of counseling too. She went into counseling.
Yes.
But also just bearing your heart to God, because I remember being in that place as a baby Christian, looking at what people expected me to look like as a Christian. And one day I just threw up my hands and said, God, I can't do it. I can't be like those people. And he said, I never asked you to be a cookie cutter Christian and to be like other people. You know, he says, I am not calling you to do anything. I'm calling you to be uniquely you and allow me to be myself and you, and your attitude and your motivation for pleasing me should move from guilt to gratitude.
Well, I tell you,
and she mentioned that.
So many of us choleric, you know, type A's tend to put so much on ourselves, and we need to realize that's not God, that's us. It's helped me tremendously. Well, though Lynn finally found intimacy and peace with the one true God, she faced more challenges on the road to becoming a good woman. Stay tuned. Lynn Hybels spent the first half of her life taking care of everyone around her, but in the process, she lost herself. After counseling and lots of rest, she now has renewed energy and passion for God and ministry, even when the road ahead is a little scary.
At one point in this healing journey that I took during my 40s, I realized that I basically had a very fearful approach to life. It was almost like I had two selves. There was my true self that really wanted to say yes to whatever God called me to do, wanted to say yes to the great adventures of life. But then I had this fearful self that always said, no, you can't do that. You might fail. You're not good enough. You know, don't even try. And I realized at that point that I wanted to get past that.
A short time later, Lynn was invited to speak to women at a church in Northern Ireland.
Immediately, I said, no, absolutely not. I cannot do that. I'm too scared. And I sensed God saying, but if you weren't afraid, would you want to do this? And I thought, well, yes, if I weren't afraid, I would.
So she accepted the invitation and thought she was saying goodbye forever to her fearful self. But she was wrong.
Every day when I went to speak, this fearful self again said, you can't do this. You're going to get up and make a fool of yourself. And I realized I have to talk down fear. And so when fear, you know, gave me these awful, you know, messages of doom, I say, well, you know, I don't care what you say. God has called me to do this, and I'm going to do it.
Even when a woman is in the center of God's will, do you think most women battle fear?
I do think most women battle fear. In fact, that's what I'm hearing from women, that they do. And what's so sad about that is that fear always hides the truth from us. It magnifies our weaknesses and it hides our potential. And that is so tragic, because the world, the church, God, our family, our friends, they all need us to show up fully in life. And we don't do that when we listen to the voice of fear.
Now in her 50s, Lynn is intent on showing up fully for her life, which means embracing her gifts and using her voice to make a difference. A new passion was birthed when on a trip to Africa, she had a chance encounter with a family of children orphaned by AIDS.
So it was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. These kids hadn't had anything to eat yet that day, and there was nothing for them to eat. And because we didn't know we were going to be there, we didn't have anything to give them. So we just stood there helplessly, you know, seeing this horrible situation. And at that moment, I just hated who I was. I was a privileged American, seeing the need and doing nothing.
When she returned home, she worked with her church in developing a strategic plan to partner with local churches in Africa on behalf of those affected by HIV/AIDS.
This has become a deep passion of mine, and I am gripped by the verse in Proverbs 31 that calls women particularly to lift up our voices on behalf of the poor and the oppressed and to become advocates for them.
You know, it's true that HIV/AIDS is the greatest humanitarian crisis the world has ever known.
It's what she calls being a dangerous woman, one who shows up with everything she is and joins the battle against whatever opposes the redeeming work of God in our lives and in our world.
For many years, I looked at the things going on in the world and I said, God, why don't you do something? And finally, when I got quite enough, I heard God saying, why don't you do something? You are my hands and feet in this world. And I really think that is the calling and the extraordinary privilege that we have as Christian women today. We are educated, We have time, we have resources, we have everything we need to make a difference. And if we unite, and if we realize that we're all in this together, and if we all make the little contribution that we can make, if we put that all together, I think we can make a huge impact on our globe.
You know, what she said about fear is so true. And I certainly feel it. Michelle, you've shared that. But when we met Dr. Billy Graham for the first time, my husband said, Dr. Graham, are you ever afraid when you address those thousands and thousands of people? He said, Jerry, when I get up to speak, my knees are knocking together. And that's just normal, isn't it?
I often say, I know it's God calling me to do something when I absolutely am confident I cannot do it myself.
That's true.
That His empowerment must happen in that situation or I will fall flat.
I think that's the position he wants, because then we surrender. We'll be back with some final thoughts.
Visit our website at aspiringwomen.tv for more about this story, including Lynn's book, Nice Girls Don't Change the World.
You know, marriage and motherhood is a place I have really struggled to find my own passions and love and serve my family. But not lose so much. What does that look like? It is a tough balance to find.
But it is a balance, and I can't tell you how much Lynn's story has impacted my life, because, you know, I kind of went the other way. Rather than doing what other people wanted me to do, I was in drama, I was in the choir, and then as I got older, I looked back and had horrible guilt because I followed my passions. And Lynn helped me to understand I shouldn't apologize for that. I mean, there is balance.
But it is important for every woman, whether she's married or single, to locate her gifts, because when we do what we were created to do, that's when we thrive, it's when we're the most fruitful, and it blesses other people besides us.
And other people are blessed. When we walk in our gifts and our abilities, everyone benefits by that. So how can we be other-focused and not lose ourselves in the process? What does it look like to give our lives away, but not our souls? Today, Lynn honestly dealt with this tenuous balance of the Christian life. Jesus himself said that we are to love others as we love ourselves, as being the operative word. I heard my friend Michelle say, it's hard to celebrate others when you can't celebrate yourself. How true. I believe that God fully intends us to love and care for ourselves, to nurture our gifts, and to intensely enjoy the person He has created us to be, the person He created you to be. We'll see you next time.